Hey everybody, I said I was going to do a live and talk about what's going on in Japan with my son, but I decided to do a video just to kind of keep it for personal sake because a lot of times they take these things down and I need to keep them for my own self. So I'm going to tell the story about how we end up in this hostage justice system and situation, and it's 16 months later. First of all, let me describe what hostage justice is. Hostage justice is where in Japan they have a 99% conviction rate. So how do you get a 99% conviction rate? How you get that is you take and you target a person that you can deem as a criminal. And you're going to find out that a lot of them are foreign citizens or foreign people that are just over there, whether they're traveling or whether they're living there on temporary visas or what have you. You're going to find out there's a lot of them. And what you do is you pin something on them, whether they're guilty or not. And what you do is you hold them until they make a confession of guilt. So what you do is you threaten them, you keep them away from their families so you can't talk. You know, in Japan, thank God my son speaks the language. He reads, writes it and whatnot, because a lot of people end up losing the battle and end up doing time for things that they're not guilty of because they can't speak the language. So my son, he could read everything that was coming across, so he wasn't, I'm not going to say, fluid, but he was fluid enough to actually be able to get the job done. And so when it came time, nobody could just pin anything on him. And for 12 months, my son was like, I am not guilty. I am not guilty, because he wasn't. All the paperwork came through, the whole nine. And so what they'll do is they'll put it on you. And what they do is they'll keep extending your time that they hold you in detention until you just get so stressed out as to where you go ahead and say that you did it. So what ended up happening is for 12 whole months, my son's strong. I didn't do it. They would not call me. I talked to the U.S. Embassy. I said, listen, I need to talk to his attorneys. And his attorneys, no, we are not talking to you. They told other Japanese people that could speak to him, no, we're not talking to her. The U.S. Embassy, I believe that they did the best that they could with for the agents. But our U.S. Embassy, they need to get their stuff together, because there's no way that you can have a U.S. citizen in there. Now, do they check on my son once a month? Yes, they do. But there's no way you can have a U.S. citizen there. And it's almost like the government doesn't even recognize it. In fact, when I went to Japan in January, on January 13th, both myself and our president of the United States was in Japan at the same time. We had landed around the same time. Go figure. So, but they don't know that he's there, right? And it's through the U.S. Embassy. So anyway, you hold over this, that you keep holding it over, and you keep them, and every person that is in detention is in a solitary confinement. So therefore, they have, if you can look it up in their rules, they're very strict rules. I'm not going to go into any details. It breaks my heart to even talk about the inhumane conditions that they're in. Now, is my child being mistreated? Absolutely not. You don't want your children to be in any of these situations like this ever again. But I would tell you this, in comparison to where my son is at, even like with American detention, if you had a choice, you would take Japanese detention. Trust me on that. The most thing they'll do is mentally keep you isolated, keep you quiet, blah, 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 stuff like that. But as far as the stuff that goes on in America, please, 99% of people, when you go in America, you are fighting for your life. In Japan, you just need to fight for your mind from boredom. That's kind of what my son does. So he is part Greek, so he has learned the entire Greek language. He's read the Bible 4 times back and forth, so they read a lot. In Japan, they're into reconditioning and things, all this other stuff, playing a bunch of mind games, to be honest. So what happened is they picked my son up. They went into his house and got him. So I guess they pretty much targeted him. My son was very popular in Tokyo. He worked at one of the top 2 IT companies there as he was an IE. What was it? No, what is it called? Yeah, artificial intelligence. He Japanese jiu-jitsu. He does, top of the game when it came to everything. Very respectful, very respected, good-looking guy, and he was just a target. And during the time when he was picked up in November 2021, 7 days later, the U.S. Embassy put out a warning to citizens, American citizens, carry your passports because the police are targeting American citizens. We get to this point where I'm at now, where we found out that my son was targeted, because of his race. Go figure. So anyway, the hostage justice system, you go in, keep them away from their families. They cannot make phone calls out. They don't have TVs or anything like that. So you get them so stressed out that they're willing to confess, and then you give them their sentence. So that's what gets them their 99% conviction rate. Most of their convictions are not based on because anybody is guilty. Their convictions are based out on somebody had to put pressure on them. Excuse me. Now, in their Constitution, they basically state that anyone cannot be convicted based on their own confession. But in Japan, even their own Constitution, they violate that. So I believe it's Amendment 15 or something like that, because I've done their laws, their amendments, the whole 9. And that's what happened. They violate their own amendments. They could care less. Nobody wants to fight against it, and nobody says anything. So they could do whatever the heck they want to do to them. So my son, we go tit for tat. I'm writing presidents, vice presidents, Rahm Emanuel, who's our ambassador to Japan. I'm writing him. I'm writing human rights people, churches, everybody you can think of to make sure that my son gets what he needs. Thank God my son had friends over there. Thank God he had people, we call them their sister or whatever, that were Japanese. And another family, my son's ex-girlfriend, his family, their family, everybody coming to people are trying to find out what's wrong. How could this stuff comes on him. They tried to accuse him of a SA, and come to find out, I'm gonna tell you about that, but it was no way that it could have been done. And so now this is where we're at. So in November, my son's attorneys, who are supposed to be fighting for him, they were working for the courts. They got in and they told him that, we've tested your DNA and everything. You are guilty. You are guilty. And my son was, well, I know I wasn't there. We sent all the evidence. Some of the people that were supposed to have been, knew where he was at and all this other stuff, because of some of their lifestyles, they didn't want to deal with the police in Japan. So they just went ghost on him. And I believe what was going on is because a lot of people were threatened. I believe that's what happened, that the police threatened them that if they testified on behalf of my son and if they were an alibi, that they would get in trouble. And nobody wants to get thrown in a cage, and Japan is not doing anything about it. The reason I'm doing this is not just to expose so much of what's going on with my son, but to expose Japan as a country. They keep getting away with things. Just last year in June, President Biden signed an executive order that any country that is holding American citizens hostage, even in detention, without doing the just due, taking them to court, doing everything they're supposed to do, that they were going to put sanctions on them. Why is Japan the only one not on the list? Does that have something to do with that meeting on the 13th in January? keeping the peace. No, you have American citizens, not just one, but American citizens sitting there at your glory, doing whatever you want to do because you feel you can, because you got a problem. So, and our country is letting you do it. Shame on you, the United States of America. How dare you? There's no reason. In America, you are guilty until proven innocent. So anyway, my son goes in. Finally, they put the pressure on him. He says, okay, maybe I was there. Knowing good and well, for a whole year, he held down and he was not. So all of a sudden, now the attorneys are ready to talk. So the person that accuses doesn't even know my son. My son doesn't know the person. But somehow, this person is there. Now, mind you, I said, well, I want to talk to the person. So this is the thing. In Japan, if you did something to somebody, they believe that you owe them an apology and you have to pay a fine. So I was going to have to pay all this yen. It came out to like maybe $20,000. And I was going to have to give an apology. My son was going to have to give an apology. And then they were still going to give him time because they felt they can control this thing. And so I get on there. Finally, the attorneys are going to talk to me. They had to get an interpreter to be able to interpret. And I questioned them. I questioned them on their laws. I questioned them on their constitution. I questioned them on everything. The interpreter says, well, it looks like you don't believe that your son is guilty. I said, I don't, because you guys are guilty. I have studied your laws. I've studied your hostage justice system. I've studied it all. And I know that you guys are playing a game. This is some type of scheme that you're doing. So lo and behold, this is November. So now they set a trial date. So they were like, well, you need to be able to come in so you can testify on behalf of his character. Not so I can bring him home. So I could testify on his character and bring them $20,000. So fast forward, it's time. Now, mind you, I couldn't get there because Japan had closed the borders. And then my business and life had just taken a big turn, and it's expensive to go there. And I just could not pay for it at that time. So God just still blessed my son no matter what. It was just a fact that the being uncertain and being held captive was a thing that we were dealing with as a family. When the embassy went in, when he wrote letters, he was okay physically, everything. It was just the mental state that he was dealing with. So I must say he was safer. Now, mind you, in their detentions, there is no heat during the winter, and there is no air conditioning during the summer. So he can wear his own clothes. He can do his own laundry. And because of COVID procedures, at times he was locked in and he could never get out. So going fast forward to the fact that, okay, now we're getting prepared for the trial. I'm getting ready to go. I'm got God. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what I'm walking into. I even told my mother, my sister and I are going. We don't know what we're getting into. And the attorneys kept saying, well, when are you going to be here? And where are you staying? I called the U.S. Embassy. The reason why, because I knew this was a scheme that they're doing. So if my sister and I hit that soil and they know where we at, what makes you think that the police couldn't come get us and throw us into a place and just keep us there and prolong it? And we couldn't get to my mother and we couldn't get any information. If it had not been for my son calling his boss at the job, I never would have known that my son was there. I was the one that had to call the U.S. Embassy in November to let them know, guys need to get over there. My son is over there. He is a U.S. citizen. He carries a U.S. passport. Trust me, if you are going to send your people anywhere, you need to know what you're doing. Research. These people know their stuff. You need to know their stuff too. So anyway, my sister and I, we finally get over there. But let me tell you what happened. How God would provide a ram in a bush. I prayed and prayed. Got some prayer. It seemed like nothing was working. At the 25th hour, because I was like, you know what? Because I'm going to tell you this. My son wasn't the only one on trial. They put me on trial. They were making me responsible for everything. They were treating me like I was a criminal, the whole nine. So it's like I had to try to fight for myself. In America, it is hard to find any international attorneys. I don't know what these attorneys are doing. And I have to admit it, I must realize all the people that I thought had clout and knew what they were doing, be best assured, I have checked them off my list. Some people are a lot of talk and a lot of game, and they really don't know what they're doing. Do your own research. Some of these people, they go to school and they get their degrees, they get all this other stuff. They don't understand law. You need to understand law. They may be a lawyer, but they don't understand law. They don't understand how to get into things, and they're about negotiating. So what it is the people don't mind negotiating my son's life. No, he is not wrong. So get him out. So what ended up happening is at the 25th hour, I was getting prepared to go to Japan. I was going to fly to my sister in California. We were going to fly to Japan from there. I'm in the house cleaning up because now I'm about to move. I needed to be away from that home because now my mind is closing in on me. So I decided to go in with my sister and her family and everything. And it has been an awesome thing ever since. Because just because my son is going through it does not mean that I'm not going through it. I'm a single mother. I was there with myself and the dog. And my family tried to help me as much as they could. And they could only go so far. And I was going into a dark place. And I knew, and my son just kept telling me, keep fighting for me. Keep fighting. As long as you're okay, I'm going to be okay. As long as you keep fighting, I keep fighting. If you give up, I'll give up. So my thing is, I have to fight. I'm that mother. I have to fight. Did I have my days where I just wanted to break? Yes, and I did. I allowed myself to do it. But I was having too many of those dark days. So I was being concerned. So at the 25th hour, I'm cleaning up the house. I got this email. It was from my son's attorneys pleading with me. Chris promised us that he was going to plead guilty, and he was not going to change his plea. Okay, what is this all about? Well, nobody told us that Chris had brand new attorneys, and we have been taken off of his case. We have been fired from the job, but he promised us he was going to let us have this case. So you mean to tell me somebody done showed up on behalf of my son? I don't care who it was. Somebody done showed up on behalf of my son, and the judges on this case fired you? To God be the glory. I am so excited that this took place. But you getting in touch with me because you want me to tell my son that he made a promise to let somebody who's not defending him and trying to make him guilty to go back and plead guilty. And they're going to say Chris decided to fight for his freedom. You think? Okay, fine. So we get into Japan. Well, before we get into Japan, I started finding out, because I didn't know who it is. I'm like, God, you will provide a ram in the bush. You are truly Jehovah Jireh. So I'm just excited that when I go now, and like the attorney say, now you're not coming for a trial. Now you're just pretty much starting day one all over. Now you can just go see your son. What to God be the glory? You ain't let me see him in 13 months. You have not let me physically talk to him. I have not heard his voice or anything in 13 months. So now you basically telling me I can go see him? Well, thank you. And I'm glad you don't have anything to do with it. So this is how this is going. So I finally get to the airport and I'm finding out all this information. My son's ex-girlfriend's dad, they got involved and they wrote to the Innocence Project. If you go on Netflix, you'll find what is called the Innocence Files. And I would advise you, if you cannot stomach the system, do not watch it. I can only watch maybe the end of, some of the stories, but I just can't watch them all the way through. And then, mind you, American systems are not like Japan's system. So you don't have to, worry about like the beatings and all that other. You don't worry about all that in Japan. Maybe in America, but not in Japan. So the Innocence Project, somebody from the Innocence, I'm like, well, what happened? The father wrote to them and told them about my son. By the time I got there, they had stopped the trial. And it was based off of him being in hostage justice. And they took the DNA to the top forensic people. And guess what? They had planted 2 different DNAs on my son. The police did. And the person that was the accuser, her testimony when the incident happened was in 2018. When they picked my son up in 2021, they called her back in and had her do a different one and say that it was my son and she had never met him. They end up going back to the crime scene and said there was no way that it could have been him. I mean, they went to his job. They did everything. So what's currently going on now is now they're finding miscarriage of justice in Japan. So how do you do it? But let me tell you about my son's attorney. My son's attorney is 5 Japanese attorneys. Thank you for America for not doing anything. Thank you. But these top attorneys, and they're connected to the Innocence Files in in America. So even though our government officials are not doing anything, the Innocence Project, they are working hand in hand. So I've had to write the Innocence Project in New York. I'm like, listen, my son's attorney is doing the best that he can. Can you please send them some help if they need it? They got this. They done got it this far. But Japan, they don't understand that fat meat is greasy. So therefore, they figure, well, we just gonna hold them. So they apply for bail because Japan doesn't have a bail system. So they've had to deny his bail twice. And they had to file for exoneration because once you file for exoneration, it's like nothing is there. That means new evidence has showed up. That means that this person never could have done it. So they got all this evidence, and now Japan is just holding them. I have been holding back interviews. I've been doing all of that because Japan, this is on them. United States dropped the ball. So United States don't get the interview, but Japan does. But in the meantime, I needed to get the story out. So we go over to Japan, and this was definitely God. From the where we stayed at the hotel to everything, I got a chance to see my son for 30 minutes. 30 minutes in 16 months. 30 minutes in 16 months. It was such an awesome time to see him, but it put a fight in me that has never been there before. That if I could destroy a country, I would. Maybe I should take that back. But it's like, why would you do this? Why would you do this? So anyway, I get a chance to see him. And mind you, it is law that you have an interpreter. And because of the attorneys that were there, and when I first got there, I did not trust them. I didn't trust anything. The attorneys had to go, his new attorneys had to go and talk to my son and tell them, could you please tell your mom to trust us, that we're going to help you. The attorney that my son has is one of the top attorneys in Japan. He has 5, even one of them studied in New York. 5 Japanese attorneys that are fighting for my black son, and they realized that it was racially motivated because he was a black man. And like I told them, I said, my son, when the situation happened with George Floyd, my son was in Japan raising money to bail people out of jail who were protesters because of this wrong. And now my son needs to be out. And now you guys are holding him. But this is our country. This is how we roll, right? So his attorney, top notch, the whole 9. So I go in, I see my son. I needed an interpreter, right? To God be the glory, they let my son interpret. And when I saw the connection between him and one of the guards, it warmed my heart. Because my son has made, even though they're guards, he's made friends. So that lets you know that God will keep you even in the midst of what you're going through. And the reason why I'm on here talking about all this, because my son is not going to get out of there and not believe that his mother did everything that she could have to make sure that he got himself free. So now things are starting to close down. And like when my attorney didn't want me to go news wise because they need to do this thing a certain way. And Japan doesn't know what to do. From the beginning, my son said that I got this prosecutor that seems to have, he just had a problem with me. When my son went in the first day, an attorney showed up and said, you're going to be out today. So my son assumed because, that attorney said he could be out today. That was a attorney that you need to pay. I'm not going to put that pressure on my family. So I'll just use the court-appointed attorneys, which that was their handle, to use the court-appointed attorneys. Before you know it, they spend it to a guilty thing. And this is how we ended up in this place. My son would have been out in less than 23 days because they can only hold you 23 days. So what they can do is if in Japan, If the judges don't get involved with the investigations or anything, the police and the prosecutors work together. If the prosecutor does not like you or the police don't like you, they can trump up charges. Pat you guys ever see Medea Goes to Jail? How that woman padded those files and things like that? That's what they do. They give it to the Japanese judges, and the judges just sign on it. And every time they need an extension, they get an extension, an extension, an extension. And their whole thing behind it is to weigh you down. Now, I don't want to say anything that would hurt his case. So therefore, I'm just telling you everything that I know based on the whole thing. Our ambassador, Rahm Emanuel, at this particular time, I believe they need to get a new ambassador. It's different when you got American citizens over there. You can come over there and shake hands with kids at an elementary school, but you don't deal with real issues. I thought ambassadors deal with real issues, like deal with American citizens. Since my son has been there, the embassy talks about how he makes cartoons. He draws, is really good at drawing and making cartoons and things like that. And they give them to all the other U.S. U.S. inmates and things. And my biggest thing with this whole thing that's going on is when my son gets out and while he's going through this, I'm not fighting for just my son. I'm fighting for all the other sons that are over there, for all the other mothers that are crying every night, trying to figure out because there's a language barrier or because there's certain rules and things like that, and because they cannot get the help they need, and you don't know who to trust. I'm crying out and fighting for them also, because this needs to end. This is a 50-year thing that they decided to do. Since they can't man up and do the things that they're supposed to do, and I understand that it's in America too. This is how the criminal system and the judicial system works. I went through this in Lake County, Indiana, that I had a countersuit, had all the evidence, and the judges and the attorneys and everything worked together, not because of and I was the one that was wrong, but she looked different from me. I'm just going to keep it that way because I do want to take that further. But when it was all said and done, it really didn't even matter that you can be not guilty, but because somebody else, it can hold out longer. And that's what they did to me in Lake County. We'll just keep rolling over the court dates. We'll keep rolling over the court dates. And eventually, every time I had a court date or something like that, the judge would get sick. And finally, when she couldn't do it anymore, she retired. Judge Kaveda Snyder, that's her name, with Lake County, Indiana. So anyway, what happened is you got all of this stuff that's going on. And still, so many people are hurting. My son's attorneys, they are working their behinds off to make sure. They went in and did one other thing just recently. They're going in doing it. And the only thing that I could do on this end, I've been able to pray. But faith without works is dead. I am choosing to act in this situation. So I'm asking anybody that sees this video, I am asking you to share it. I am asking you to get it to as many people as you like. I'm going to put it on as many platforms as I can. And if you can get anybody, I am not going to do any type of news at this time. But if you're interested in that, then, because I've talked to a few people that were interested in it, they want all the paperwork, the whole nine. I'm not willing to reveal any of that stuff yet because I don't know how they're going to spin this. But this is a real case. Just know that my son has been found not guilty. The DNA, everything, they've already filed for the exoneration, the whole nine. The only thing that's happening with Japan is that they just want to hold him. Because how do you admit that you took a young man with a good reputation, has never been in trouble, has done any of this stuff, and you accuse him of something like this? And then when you are guilty, when you find out that you didn't realize that our God is bigger, and you did not realize that God was going to provide a ram in a bush, and now you don't know how to spin this. So I'll come in with you a little bit as things come on. Feel free to follow on some of the things because I'll explain, a few more things. But I want to kind of get this out. I was at work and, all the kids are gone, and I decided, let me sit here afterwards because I'll keep prolonging it and prolonging it and prolonging it. And the reason why we did it is because we didn't know how they were going to spin this thing. And I wanted to protect my son's integrity. I really did. I would have put it out a long time ago. And the Brittany Griner thing, I'm telling you, our country has to get it together. When you go to these foreign countries, make sure that you're not good at anything. Make sure you're just an average person. Make sure you're not going to make any waves, and then you'll be okay. If you want to study on the system, look up this famous story. This is what broke the hostage justice system, and is called. His name is Carlos Ghosn, but it's Carlos Ghosn. That is his name. Look him up. He was the one that he was convicted. They got so angry with him that when they gave him bail, he had to have an airplane waiting on him, and they took him out in a box and sent him back to Lebanon. Sent him to Lebanon. That's how deep it was, because he said he knew he wasn't going to get a fair trial, even though he was not guilty. Come to find out, if you look at the interview that they just put up regarding that, they said that the country was just jealous. The people were just jealous, and they worked together with the police and everything to set him up. And he knew, and to this day, he still is afraid to go into Japan. This man was a multimillionaire. Then there's another guy, I can't think of his name. Look up, it was a young man on YouTube. He was in hostage justice. He was from Australia. His daddy is a multimillionaire. They kept him. He was just going over there with his band. And one night they got him. Then the hard part was this little boy named Adam. And he had to be like maybe 18, 19. He was over in Japan. And he was just going, he stayed at like an Airbnb, a hostel. And he knew that how they were doing, the gangs and things like that were taking the passports and whatnot. So he left his passport in his room, and he left his money in his room. He goes to a local bar. Somebody decides to buy him a drink. He wakes up, did not realize they had slipped something into it. He wakes up in the bar. He sees the police over him. He's deciding to fight. He's startled. All of a sudden, what ends up taking place is he's like, wait a minute. What is going on? Before you know it, they had him in handcuffs. They had this young man, I think he was maybe 21, 22 years old. They kept him in detention for 11 months. 11. Because he was like, I'm not guilty. His mom had to raise money to pay a fine. And he had to plead guilty, and they had to give him a suspended sentence. And he did nothing. And it was over a light bulb. They said he had broke a light bulb. But when they said he broke it, he said, well, it's $1,000. I'll go to my room. Hey, I got the money in my room. I'll pay it. No, they just threw him in jail for 11 months. And one of the police accused him of hitting him. No marks, no nothing. How he was able to get a suspended sentence is they found out that he had never hit the police. This is what is going on. Our country has already made put things in place for things like this to be dealt with. But why isn't Japan on that list to be sanctioned? Why aren't they on that list? If there's an executive order that's in place, you know why? Because nobody has made any noise about the fact that Japan is taking American citizens and holding them hostages. And the worst part about it is my son is a black man from America, and they're holding him hostage. So I will continue to keep you guys up to date, but I thank you, and please remember to share this. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.